So, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I was made privy of the two poles of current psychoanalytic thought by the famed Zizek Peterson debate. The topic they were debating that night was Marxism, capitalism, and happiness. I'd already known about Peterson and had read his books, including The Harder Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, which is written as a massive academic article almost with abstracts at the beginning and clear, concise sentences throughout. However, I was not aware of Zizek, who represents the Lacanian psychoanalytic heritage rather than the Jungian, which Peterson is influenced by. My relevance in this subject is that I am driven by curiosity. I'm a keen autodidact, a self-learner, and wanted to immerse myself in the poles of psychoanalytic theory. Your relevance, I believe, is because you want to be immersed and knowledgeable about any field in which you choose to enter. And the thesis here is that if you are trying to enter a new field, if you're trying to enter something that's unknown to you, you should start at each pole of the field, the opposite poles, and unite them, bridge the poles. So for Zizek and Peterson represents the Jungian psychoanalytic perspective with emphasis on the collective unconscious and wisdom and archetypes, whereas Zizek represents Lacanian psychoanalysis with its emphasis on rationality and the pure structures of the psyche, which can be divined through rationality. Zizek's influences are beyond simply Lacan, but he reads everything that he reads through Lacan. He, for instance, is also his second, maybe not his second biggest, but an equal influence to Lacan is his influence of Hegel. Hegel being the German idealist philosopher from the early 19th century. And so he reads Hegel through Lacan and Lacan through Hegel and vice versa. He's also obviously well versed in Marxism and different philosophers, and his friend Badeau, who is a living philosopher on par with Hegel, according to Zizek, and also Heidegger, Nietzsche, etc. Whereas Peterson is influenced by Carl Jung, Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, the existentialism of Dostoevsky in Russian literature, and the biblical heritage. I would say Zizek's horizon, his ontology, his thought horizon, is in line with Hegelian absolute knowing, is what it's called. Absolute knowing, which means absolute knowing means that the subject is delineated in space as against its background and the grounding under its feet. And for Zizek, this subject has a thought horizon that extends out into that background. And the background is known as a non-all. All that is not substantial being is known as a non-all. So the background, the grounding is non-all, whereas being, the subject, is all, known as the all of substantial being, or the substance or the life force or anything like that, is known as the all of being. And the horizon is such that the subject sees out to the distance, and where their horizon ends is impinged upon by the impingement of the real, the Lacanian real, that comes down from the abyss, underneath and above and all around. And the background, the non-all, comes out of nothingness, out of a void nothingness, which is the Lacanian real. And you can think of it as those little battlegrounds that were in the Super Mario Smash Bros. Video games, where there was a background in the distance, but then there's a platform that you would fight on. This platform is the background, or the grounding is the non-all. The players are the subjects, and the ground that's beyond the realm of space, that's beyond the vision, is the Lacanian real, or the abyss, or the void that being and the grounding comes out of. So when the subject sees out into the distance, they actually see where the edges of their horizon impinged upon by the real, and there's this gap between what the real is and its impingement and its touching of the background of the non-all. There's an impingement, and this gap between the real and the non-all, or our background, is transposed onto reality itself, such that the gap, this lack of understanding, this unknown, is part of reality. That is Zizek's ontology, his thought horizon, his conception of reality. And it's not so different, except that it has much more three-dimensional space and metaphysical space. It creates a picture in metaphysical space that you can see and envision. And I like the reference to the Super Mario game with the platform, with the players on the platform fighting, and the background, and then on the edges of the screen you see nothing, and out of that would be the void on the edges, the real impinging on the background, or the non-all. And then the platform would be the grounding, still part of the non-all, and the players would be the subjects, the all, the substantial being. With this conception of reality, metaphysical reality, Zizek has a very interesting line of thought to pursue. Peterson, on the other hand, also speaks of the order as such. Order, a walled city, as in Eden, the Garden of Eden. A walled city creating order, and outside the wall is the impingement of the unknown, forces of the unknown in nature, chaotic nature in its potentiality. And he believes that the subject has to venture outside of the walled city and conquer the unknown impinging on the walls, and expand the domain of order, so that the walls grow further and further out and expand the city outward in every direction. Peterson is influenced by Carl Jung, who discovered the collective unconscious and the archetypes contained therein. This is such that there's archetypes such as benevolent and chaotic nature, tyrannical or wise king, and devil figure or heroic figure. These are some of the archetypes. Carl Jung also articulated the shadow as an archetype, the anima or the animus as a sprightly spirit that exists in all of us and takes the opposite sex in our psyche. And he also pointed to, what was the other archetype he pointed to? Does not matter for now. For now, just know that Peterson extended the categorization of Carl Jung and his expansive work, Maps of Meaning, and he made the rationale for each explicit, the wisdom of each explicit, of each archetype, and he explained a diagram of reality that took into context the process, the journey of the hero, which goes from horrible present or undesirable present to desired future, and there's a journey, a process of moving between the two. A journey in between the present, undesired, horrible present, unbearable present, and desired future. The heroic journey takes place in between the two, moving from one, the present, to the desired future. And Peterson inherited this from Carl Jung, and Zizek inherited his perspective from Lacan, who carried on the work of Freud, articulated the structures of the mind, came up with things like the mirror stage, or the real, or the big other, or the subject's ego. Such are the influences and backgrounds of these thinkers. I would say that Zizek carries on the tradition of the rational Socratic philosopher, the Greek philosophy. And Peterson carries on the heritage of the wise Christian prophet. Do not see the utility in both sides. The fact that on one side you have pure rationality, which is not altogether outside the realm of conception for Peterson, but for Zizek it is the absolute of everything. That you have a rational subject that can delineate itself in space and see into the horizon and see the edges of its reality, whereas Peterson believes that the subject is encased in a collective unconscious that encases it and it embeds it within the wisdom of millennia of generations of human beings, such that reality is inscribed into the human psyche, as is the structure of reality is inscribed into the human psyche through the unconscious. However, with Peterson, you have wisdom, Christian wisdom often, and Zizek you have rationality. Now Zizek will criticize wisdom, saying that there could be wise businessmen in his country of Slovenia that say, oh, you cannot piss against the wind if a businessman succeeds, or if the businessman fails, he will say, oh, you cannot piss against the wind, and if he succeeds, he will say, you cannot succeed without risk. They have a saying that captures the end point of their observation, but it really says nothing about the process of getting there. And Zizek would say that the wisdom labels end results without determining the chain of cause and effect beneath it. And so the wisdom is without substance or backing and can be made of trite comparisons, frivolous comparisons that have no meaning. Peterson would criticize rationality, saying that the most rational figure in the Western heritage is the devil figure, who says that everything that he knows is all he needs to know, and he will not learn any more or take any other vantage point. So Zizek believes that wisdom has no grounding, and Peterson believes that rationality can all too often tilt into excess rationality and close down into its own individual unit unnecessarily. Now, for Peterson, it should be noted that he believes that rationality fits into that process of the hero's journey, where the hero has to discriminate his actions, his choices, and he has to place himself from the undesired present, the unbearable present, to the desired future. And through that, he has to adjudicate between choices, actions, thoughts, speech, that takes rationality to place itself in that context and to properly navigate the maze or the journey to that desired future, such that the hero uses rationality as a tool. And this is in fact what the wisdom of the Bible and all these heritages express, is that the hero's journey is one of a subject, one figure going through the process through rationality. And this in itself is a type of wisdom, knowing and naming this process. It's harder to say what Zizek believes of wisdom because he's very critical of it. And yet he recognizes, along with Peterson, the place of the unconscious mind, where they know that the influence of the unconscious is likely to supersede ineffable intellectualized knowledge. That is, the unconscious mind, whether it be the collective unconscious or the regular id unconscious in the subject, has a more apparent knowledge in the fact that you will act on its requests over your intellectualized knowledge. So you could be intellectually thinking, I do not want to drink alcohol because it will cloud my judgment, make me groggy, make me sleepy. But then your unconscious you'll go and drink it anyways. So your action speaks to a more apparent knowledge than your intellectualized knowledge. Speaking of the unification of Zizek and Peterson, I came back to their debate a year later, after having read most of Zizek's work, his prime works, and I found that I could compromise between the two and bridge the poles, where they were talking about postmodern neo-Marxism, where Zizek would say that postmodern neo-Marxism is an oxymoron and did not take place in the minds of any individual thinker such as Foucault, Derrida, or any other, or Deleuze. Peterson says, on the other hand, that as a collective, academics have internalized the Marxist and postmodern critiques and unified them into a congealed ideology. Now, if we were to take Zizek's critique of ideology, we would say, and his idea of capitalism commodifying things, creating a commodity fetish, we would find that the postmodern neo-Marxism is a commodified ideology of the modern late capitalism. What do I mean by this? I mean that capitalism has marketed certain ideas, and it's become fashionable and part of the culture to embrace a certain ideology. A postmodern neo-Marxism is the best name for it, where academics and people in the culture, regular culture, like in the media, in Hollywood, everywhere, espouse the postmodern neo-Marxist viewpoint and pay homage to it and virtue signal and attach themselves to that ideology as if it were a commodity. And it is a commodity produced by the specter of capitalism. Meaning that capitalism will sell, let's give this as an instance, it will build you the 32 bathrooms to fit each gender identity. It will sell you flags that support your cause. It will sell you goods that support your cause. Every corporation will take a knee and say, end racism, end sexism, support this cause, wear this color. And it then becomes commodified, the ideology, such that it's a product that can be sold to you. And the ideology itself is the product. Excuse me. The pattern of thinking of that ideology is itself a commodity, something that is sold to you through the mimetic network, largely, and through the exchange of ideas. However, that is how we unite Peterson and Zizek. Peterson says there is postmodern neo-Marxism. Zizek says we take his critique of ideology and we say it is a commodified ideology produced by late capitalism. And there we have found a meeting point of the two poles on that particular issue. But now we understand Lacanian's rational structures of the mind and Petersonian or Jungian wise collective archetypes. We can unite this understanding and bridge this understanding and integrate both ideas into our knowledge of the field. And with this knowledge of the field, we will go forward and we will be able to expound further insights into the field of psychoanalysis. Thank you. Oh, and one last point on the curiosity aspect. When you're engaging a new author, each author has their own idiosyncratic way of writing. They have different structures of their sentences, flow of ideas, flow of paragraphs, integration of whole chapters and the whole subset of their books collectively. Each one has just like with playing a guitar or an instrument, each guitar player has a unique way of interacting with the strings and the physical being and presence of the guitar. Such that they produce a unique sound particular to them. Similarly, each author has a way of writing that is particular to them. Peterson writes in the structure, he addresses Jungian collective archetypes and wisdom, and he articulates the ideas of the Western lineage and Western heritage. And Zizek is a counterintuitive thinker, a rational thinker, but often thinks counterintuitively and criticizes different movies, artworks, music, food in his work. Each one you have to adjust to their way of writing. But once you adjust, every future book or every future writing that you read of that author becomes easier and easier to digest, and you get used to the idiosyncratic style of their writing. And so stay curious, engage yourself in the writings, and keep an open mind to any position, because as Peterson says, you have to assume that the person you're speaking to knows something you do not. And in this case, the poles each have a unique contribution to be made. And the very last thing is that I believe that at this level of intellect, each thinker, such as Zizek or Peterson, has arrived at their thought through a lifetime of valid thinking, and it is a valid journey at this level of intellect. Not every journey is valid, but at this level of intellect, the journey is valid, and it is very valuable as well. Thank you, and God bless you all.